The afternoon session. The attendance register is circulating. What is it that you want? Just show me where the attendance register is. Who's got the register? All right, guys, we are live. Hello, Linda.
Hi.
Marius. Hello. We are very happy to be part of this conference, and we're very happy to welcome both you and Marius into our room. And we're very excited to listen to the Africa in Comparison session with Vanessa, that's joining us physically on the podium. So please go ahead and enjoy yourselves.
Okay, everyone. Welcome to the launch conference, the second day, as Amanda said. And we are so proud and honored to be doing and holding this conference in partnership with the Companies and Intellectual Property Commission. Thank you, Amanda. Under the theme of still growing respect for IP in Africa. Now, this afternoon is going to be really interesting, and we're going to start with two amazing experts to talk about African comparison, and then we'll have a comfort break, and then we'll go on to talk about supply chain. Now, what, if you remember from yesterday, one of the great themes that emerged from the whole of the discussion was this disparity between countries, between regulatory boards, between all sorts of concepts that today perfectly aligned. We have this conversation. It was done on purpose. It was not an accident. So today we're going to talk about African comparison, and we're going to talk, we have two great experts to discuss and unpack the causes for the lack of common rules on IP governance in Africa, and how can Africa's business and consumers get involved so as to instigate for more competitive IP services. And we have with us, as I said, two fabulous experts. And Marius will forgive me if I start with a female colleague, seeing that I'm a lady first, okay? So on stage in Cape Town, we have Vanessa Ferguson. You met her yesterday. She's an experienced IP attorney with a specific focus on anti-counterfeiting and associated enforcement measures. For more than 2 decades, Vanessa has been assisting clients from all industries and all areas in respect of both traditional and non-traditional IP protection and enforcement, not only in South Africa, but in key African territories. She has a strong focus on border enforcement measures, as you glean from the conversation that we had with her yesterday. She works closely with government bodies and industries in South Africa and is actively involved in training programs for law enforcement, customs, and other role players in anti-counterfeiting and IP enforcement. And online joining us, you have Marius Schneider. And Marius is the founder and director of IP Vukat Africa. I hope I said it right. I hate offending people. A law firm focusing on the protection, management, and enforcement of IP rights all over Africa. He assists clients, including multinationals from Europe, North America, in setting up and enforcing their IP strategies across Africa. Marius, together with Vanessa, are the authors of the 2020 Oxford University Press publication, Enforcement of Intellectual Property Rights in Africa. And it's the first book discussing intellectual property rights enforcement in all 54 African countries. And I expect an autograph the next time we are together. He is a lawyer at the Brussels Bar and is registered as a legal advisor in Mauritius. And my job here is done because I am looking forward to this discussion as much as everybody else. So over to you, our fabulous experts.
Yes, so thank you very much, Linda. Thank you for that fabulous introduction. Yes, I'm just going to share my screen here. Vanessa, can you see my screen, Vanessa?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. So it's, I guess, in your bag. Yeah, so let me just start. You have started by presenting Vanessa. The presentation is that I start to present us. I'm very, very happy to be there. So thank you very much to CIPC. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I would have loved to be in Cape Town, but you know, the situation is that it's this time not possible, but it feels like next time it will be possible, and already that feeling is great. So Vanessa and I are going to take you on a journey through Africa and are going to talk you through the problems and challenges and joys when one encounters when enforcing intellectual property rights. So we will start off by having a very quick look at Africa, because we are aware that you're all Africans, or most of you, but some may not be. So then we're going to look at the enabling factors for counterfeiting and piracy on the African continent, at as well the positive developments, and we're going to finish off our presentation with a few tips and tricks on IP enforcement in Africa. So that's the journey we would like to take you on, and I think we just jump in right here and look at the top economies of Africa. Vanessa.
We say Africa, my home continent, and very passionate and close to my heart. If we look at Africa, it's a continent with exciting opportunities. There's business opportunities for business holders, brand holders alike. We've seen an increase over the past decades in investment in the launching of international brands and business in Africa. So where are people going? What are the economies they're looking at? And we've seen a change over the last few years with the change in the top economies. South Africa used to be a little bit higher up in the list, and we see that international business are looking into Africa and extending their footprint. So if we look at it, the top of the list is Nigeria. It's the largest economy, with one of the largest countries as well in Africa. The north itself, an important territory, especially for the EU, where we've got economies such as Egypt, where its economy relies on agriculture, media, petroleum, imports, natural gas, and tourism. If we look at South Africa, dominating the southern African region, and here we've got large exports of gold, platinum, other natural resources, and it's become well established. If we look at the east of Africa, Ethiopia and Kenya dominating that territory. Kenya being the largest economy and has the most industrialized developed country in East Africa. If we just have a look and see how Africa's changed, looking now and seeing Ethiopia at number 7 on top economies, we can remember back quite some years ago where it was the face of Ethiopia was the famine-stricken country. And it's really wonderful to see how it's developed into one of the darlings of the global development community.
Yes. Thank you for that. Oops, I'm just going to, well, to the next slide. So what we can actually see is that, as Vanessa already said, international companies are increasingly looking into Africa, and probably one can say, and it's fair to say, that Africa is the next big thing. Why is that so? Because in Africa, the GDP growth consistently outpaces the global average. So that makes it really, really interesting for multinational companies to invest the continent. Also, Africa has a young and growing population that increasingly lives in urban centers, and this young and growing middle class, if I may call it like that, does really like to spend their money on branded products, quality products, and in that sense, the consumer expenditure on the continent is expected to reach 2.5 trillion by 2030. That really explains the presence of these large, fast-moving consumer good companies on the African continent, and explains why, you know, Africa has become so very interesting now. Not to forget about e-commerce in Africa, because also e-commerce in Africa is rising, and it is expected to nearly double to 29 billion this year. And these are, let's say, figures that may even come up higher with the pandemic situation. But we will speak a little bit about e-commerce as a specific topic during this presentation. So what, you know, it really comes down to Africa is the next big thing. And that's really good, I think, for all of us Africans.
Great. Marius, do you want to move the slides, or are they moving
Yeah,
your side?
I moved the
just not our
slides to, I've moved the slides to the trading partners.
Okay, it just seems to be stuck on our side. We're still on the top 10 economies. There we go. So who's doing business with Africa? Who are the key partners, and who's investing? China surpassed USA as the top trading partner in 2009 and stays there. If we just look at the value of trade between Africa and China, it rose by 35% from 2020. And this was mainly due to the increase in Chinese exports to the continent. This was influenced by COVID, with PPEs, looking at masks and other goods that have found their way into Africa. An important point to look at is the investment that China's made in Africa. There's a Chinese proverb that says, if you want to prosper, first build roads. And that holds true with their commitment and their engagement in Africa. They've invested in a huge amount of development, invested in agriculture, special trade and economic cooperation zones in several states such as Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Zambia. If we look at other key important parties, the EU, in 2019, for example, over 65% of the goods imported to the EU were from Africa, with the primary goods being food and drinks, raw material, and energy. Northern Africa is very important, and it makes sense from the geographical distance and location to the EU, and that is then followed by the Western Africa and Southern Africa as being priority countries. USA still remains a main export and import partner, trading partner, and it's a matter that we look at it. If just between those three territories, they account for almost 50% of exports from sub-Saharan Africa, even though trade with other emerging markets is increasing.
Yes, thank you very much. So this was a brief introduction to Africa and the economics. Now we're going to look briefly at the enabling factors for counterfeiting on the continent, and those that are, let's say, specific to Africa. You will see on this slide, we will touch upon every topic, even the really more sensitive ones. Before we do so, I think we have to look quickly at the figures and view briefly the scope of the problem of counterfeiting in Africa. So here are a few figures on that slide, which I think are really illustrating very well the problem. First figure is the 42% of cases of substandard or falsified pharmaceutical companies occur in Africa. So that's more than on any other continent. Even in South America, Eastern Europe, you don't have such a high number of cases of falsified medicine. And, you know, really on our continent, unfortunately, counterfeit medicine kills every day consumers. And that is something that we have to take action against collectively. And that's, I think, one of the reasons also why we meet here. But it's not only medicine, it's also alcohol and other food products that can be, you know, tampered with. So 66% of the alcohol consumed in Mozambique was either illicit or counterfeit. That's just an illustrative figure and applies probably to a lot of food products. The same reasoning for tobacco sales. There is also a huge percentage of tobacco products on the continent that are counterfeit. Creative content, also very very abused, if I may say so. A figure from Algeria, 60% of creative content in Algeria is pirated. So, you know, a huge percentage. And a study by the EU IPO, so the European Intellectual Property Office, estimates that 21% of smartphone sales have been lost in Africa only in 2015 due to counterfeit products. So, you know, a huge figure. On the good side is that there's a huge amount of seizures carried out by customs. For example, in South Africa, 2.7 billion rand of counterfeit goods seized last year. So that's a great figure. And whilst I'm in South Africa, I take the opportunity to congratulate South African customs to that. But also it shows the extent of the problem. And now we want to dig into the, let's say, enabling factors. And Vanessa, the first one is for you, porous borders.
Yeah. Looking at our borders, although in Africa we have controlled border posts, a vast majority of our borders are unpoliced or unmanned. If we just, for example, look at South Africa, we share 5,000 kilometers of land borders with our neighbors, and the majority of those are easy to cross. Just for example, if we look at Limpopo, which is regarded as the gateway to Africa, the amount of smuggling that takes place across the Limpopo River, it's through the river itself, organized by syndicate operations, where their sole focus is just really looking at getting goods and motor vehicles and other smuggled goods across the border place. So that's created a new beast that we'll have to deal with. Just looking at COVID, when we had the restrictions on liquor and cigarettes, this was definitely an aspect that was increased in size. We had more goods flowing across the border place. Security issues and terrorism are also another aspect that we have to deal with at our borders. For example, if we look at the Nigeria and Cameroon border, it's prone to terrorist attacks, and obviously trying to police and monitor goods in that type of environment is almost impossible. In Central African Republic, in 2015, it was held that a quarter of the borders were accessible by customs, leaving the remaining three-quarter open to illicit trade. So what has also happened with these porous borders, if we look at trading across our borders, informal cross-border trade is very important in Africa. Surprisingly, it's driven a lot by women and dealing with small consignments. And this is really necessitated by the goods that need to flow across borders. This adds a whole new aspect to trying to police at borders. We're dealing with a lot of small consignments that are being brought through by individuals. So gone are the days where we would just look for the 40-foot container. We need to identify and deal with these aspects. Diversion of goods is one of the strategies that has now found its way and is commonly used in Africa. where they'll, for example, know that the policing is stronger at ports such as Durban and Cape Town, and then they'll divert these goods through to our neighboring territories, where there might not be as much controls, or alternatively, there might be more of an issue with bribery and corruption. So goods are, for example, sent through to Mozambique and diverted back into Africa, or South Africa. Now the issue is looking at the landlocked countries. What we've shown on the slide there is the yellow countries, which are all landlocked. They rely on the transfer of goods from the neighboring territories and the main ports. If we look at it, what's happening in Eastern Africa, there's a lot of goods that are earmarked as destined for DRC, but these goods are solely or intended for the purpose of the other Eastern African countries and never actually make it to the border place. So these are the issues that we need to confront at our borders. Very difficult because the manpower issues and also the extent of the porous borders.
Yes, thank you, Vanessa. And going straight on from what Vanessa just said, landlocked countries and porous borders is the issue of free trade zones. By the way, the largest free trade zone is about to be built in Djibouti. Why is that? So Djibouti is a little bit, if I may say so, at the frontier of the continent. It is one of the endpoints or African docking points of the Chinese Road and Belt Initiative, Silk Road Initiative, and so one of the entry points of Chinese and Asian goods onto the continent. And Djibouti also serves as a port of entry for Ethiopia, which is a landlocked country and one of the, as Vanessa said, economic powerhouses of Africa. So this explains you a little bit more why, Djibouti is such a big free trade zone. Now, maybe go back to what are free trade zones. Free trade zones are lightly regulated zones, that is to say, zones in which there is little legislation, little control from the authorities, be it customs, police. They have limited powers there. There is also a light taxation regime or no taxation regime. Why? Because goods are brought into the free trade zone either for transit purposes or for the purpose of repackaging, further manufacturing and the like. So the goods are not really produced there, but just finished there in a way, and they are not sold there because they only transit there and continue out from the free trade zone. And of course, who says lightly regulated zones means that there is a risk that counterfeiters do abuse of these free trade zones to hide their illicit practices. And that is actually shown by hard facts, because the EU IPO, and that's the European IP Office, as well as the OECD, did a study and came to the conclusion that one additional free trade zone within a given economy increases the risk of counterfeiting by nearly 6%. So meaning that, one additional free trade zone increases the problem dramatically. And if you understand that, and if you take into account that 31 African states do now have a free trade zone, you really understand how they can be used to fuel the counterfeiting problem on the continent. Corruption, Vanessa, that's a very difficult one. I'm always very happy to leave that to you, to be very honest.
Thanks, Marius, my dear friend. Always leaves me with the elephant in the room. That aspect that we need to deal with, and we need to confront it head on. Corruption and bribery is definitely one of the enabling factors. Even though I have said that, I can honestly say from a point of view, I've worked with the most dedicated law enforcement officials, not just in South Africa, but other African countries. But corruption and bribery is there on many, many levels, and we have to address it. I know I can speak about it because we do actually have our very own African Anti-Corruption Day, which is the 11th of July. So this goes to show how there is an awareness for anti-corruption and how to deal with it. As I mentioned, it varies from country to country, where it is more concerning. If we look at, for example, the Republic of Congo, which is reportedly highest in Africa, whilst Mauritius, where my dear friend Marius is sitting, boasts one of the lowest bribery rates. Nigeria, and I mean, if we just look at the amount of revenue that's lost through it, Nigeria, the National Association of Nigerian Traders, estimates the loss to corruption along borders to be 130 billion naira. Cameroon, the Anti-Corruption Commission highlighted Cameroon Customs as the most corrupt agency in the country from 2010 to 2015. Hopefully that's definitely not one of those rankings that you want to continue with. And in sub-Saharan Africa, 17.3% of firms cite customs as one of the most serious constraints to business investment and one of the most corrupt. Looking at it, it's extremely important for Africa to put together an anti-corruption commitments that are focused on bringing in measures. And I think that's the whole driving force of dealing with the awareness and dealing with it at root level.
Yes, and really, you know, it's frustrating to see that there is this huge corruption problem at customs, because when you come like you, Vanessa, or like me from South Africa or Mauritius, where customs enforcement works very well, then you see how frustrating it is, because for us, if I may say so, our first ally in the fight against counterfeiting is always customs, but it's understandable that companies say, well, we don't really engage with customs if they are such a corrupt crowd. So yeah, that's really an important one. Then, of course, you know that it's everywhere in the world like that. Online marketplaces and social media platforms do increasingly fuel the trade in counterfeit and pirated goods. And, you know, it's surprising, but there are many really African online marketplaces which are not known to our friends in Europe or in America, where eBay, Amazon kind of trust these marketplaces and are the main players. Well, in Africa, we have in the 5 biggest economies, we have 12 companies that are not known even to Europeans and outside of Africa. So South Africa, you have Takealot, Bid or Buy, you in Kenya, Jumia, and the like. So we put them on the screen, no need to repeat that here. So what is interesting is that these African platforms, they can deal with something that Amazon and eBay can't. That is the problem of the address. With Amazon and eBay, they require your precise and exact address when they want to deliver something to you. It will not be possible to deliver something, you know, opposite Bank of Africa in that little village. That would not work for them. But these African platforms, they work around this, and so that's how they could really establish themselves on the African continent. So that's quite interesting also as a background. Well, but also interestingly, in Europe, North America, and everywhere else in more, let's say, more developed markets, there is these notice and takedown mechanisms, whereby when a right holder notices that counterfeit or pirated goods are sold on an online marketplace, they can inform the marketplace, and then the goods are taken down. Now, these 12 online marketplaces that are here on the screen, well, only half of them do actually have a reporting mechanism for IP infringements in place. And funnily, one of the Nigerian e-commerce websites allowed reporting of infringing goods only by postal mail. Until very recently, that changed, by the way. But I still would like to give this anecdote. So you could send them a letter to report that counterfeit goods were on sale on the platform. But of course, by the time the letter reached the platform, the goods were already long sold. So, you know, that's a big problem. And Vanessa, I think you want to add a few words there?
Just from a point of view, if we can just see, I know for myself, we're a very suspicious continent when it comes to online shopping. And I myself, for example, never did online shopping before COVID. And I think just by raise of hands that it would be interesting to see how many more people have actually now got the confidence to continue online. But with that, we're also dealing with the scenario of, number one, increased courier and delivery services that are popping up and distributing those goods, which make it a little bit more difficult to police. We've got an increase in small consignments, small parcels that are coming in via post, which is putting a huge amount of strain for investigations and also assessments at our borders and airports. The other aspect is we're dealing with a new area of economy which is growing to such an extent, but we lack the resources and the expertise to police this. In many countries, we're dealing with a scenario where the police force don't even have a computer, never mind the expertise and skills in dealing with online enforcement measures. So there's a lot of work to be done, and definitely it's creating an environment which increases the likelihood of counterfeits and also supporting the distribution.
Yeah, and Vanessa, then there's another difficult one for you here, limited resources and laid-back attitude.
We always joke with the time. Marius, so this is that the Swiss made the watches and we've got the time.
Exactly.
And it's something to explain to international business. We're dealing with two things. Number one, limited resources. What resources have we got available to us? It's always a capacity issue. Making and ensuring, and part of this, it's also a political aspect where mandates are given to, for example, one unit who doesn't have the capacity. What is happening, for example, between different law enforcement officers in bringing up those capacity issues. But if we look at Central African Republic, for example, it was under-resourced to such an extent that in some cases, basic resources such as paper, petrol are required for actions. And this is not unusual. Cameroon, in the case of a number of other territories, have limited resources and capacity to conduct in-depth investigations. And this is shared by a number of other African countries, where those type of resources and effort needs to take place on the part of the brand holder as opposed to law enforcement. So the funding of the basic needs for enforcement results in difficulties. We're dealing with international transparency issues and also anti-bribery and corruption laws, where we need to make it very clear that we cannot pay for any other resources or monies going to government funding. So that is our first issue that we have to overcome. The second one is the concept of time in Africa, where we're looking, and it's definitely a matter where we'll say just now has a specific meaning in Africa, now, which is in some extents can cause a lot of frustration, because when you are dealing with efficient departments and clients who are used to working within an environment which is incredibly efficient, they don't actually understand the fact that these things take longer. We have seen an improvement. I think people are becoming a lot more time conscious as in the past, and this is definitely an area where we need to make sure, like for example, we'll have to do a lot of follow-ups. We have to make sure that meetings are set up and kept in place, that we can keep that in place. So there has been improvement, but yeah, Africa time, it's called Africa time for a reason, but I think slowly but surely that's changing.
Yes, so these are the enabling factors, and you've seen we've been very straightforward, and we've touched upon, I hope, everything. Now, that may paint a little bit of a dire picture of our beautiful continent, but I'm proud to say that there are lots of positive developments, and that's what we'll be looking into now. IP laws, legal remedies, customs recordals, and also technological measures. So let's just dive into the positive vibes of Africa and start with IP laws. So one first point that Vanessa and I concluded when we wrote our book, we looked, at 54 jurisdictions within Africa analyzed the laws there and the remedies that are available. And one thing that we found out is that every country but one, which is actually Burundi, do criminalize a willful copyright and trademark infringement. So the good news really is that criminal sanctions are available for a willful trademark or copyright infringements all over Africa, with the exception of Burundi, and I'm quite sure that the law there will change as well. So that's really good news. Why is that good news? Well, because the criminal route, when it comes to enforcing IP rights, is really dissuasive, right? Comes together with sometimes prison sentences, but also strong fines, ineligibility, and Africans are proud people, so if they are ineligible or can no longer have their titles, prince or chief or the like, well, that is, a really strong social sanction. So this, the fact that the criminal sanctions are available is really something very positive. Another very positive thing is that African countries are modernizing their IP laws. In Mauritius, we just have the new IP Act of 2019 that entered into force this month, actually, which provides stronger protection for intellectual property rights. And that's not only the case for Mauritius, but also for many, many other African countries. And we just give here a list. But if you want to know all about the subject, then I'm afraid to say you have to buy our book, because in there it's all explained and there you have every detail. So here we just give a little overview. Also, what is super positive really is that there are amendments, and some countries come up with things that go further than everywhere else in the world. And as one of these amendments, I'd like to mention the Kenyan Anti-Counterfeiting Act. That act provided for a mandatory customs recordal for all imported branded products into Kenya. So if you are importing a branded product into Kenya, you will now have to register your trademark with the anti-counterfeiting authorities, which will give the information to local customs, and they will then be able to take action. So that is something, I've written a book on customs enforcement in the European Union, and they have quite a sophisticated system there, but it's not as sophisticated as that, because there is no such thing as a mandatory recordal. And as I say, Kenya, an African country, which is already at the forefront with the Anti-Counterfeiting Agency, is now working on this mandatory customs recordal. I think it's just in the last phase before implementation. It has taken a little bit longer because of the COVID situation, but they're working very hard from it, and the signals I hear from Kenya are very positive. So we can expect this to hopefully become a reality in 2022. So you see that there are things in Africa that we Africans, if I may say so, can do that, not even they're doing it in other continents.
Maybe I can just step in on training, seeing as today's event this morning and the precursor to this international is focused on training. There are a lot of training and capacity building initiatives in Africa. Not enough, but I think we've got to highlight and we've got to really give a commendation for those ones that are in place. If we just look at, for example, with WIPO, where they focused on basically 12 new educations, first looking at Arepa and Awapi, and also 10 other countries. We've got our own training manual, which you're all being trained on over the next couple of days, or past and coming days, which is a collaboration with CIPC and resulting in a certification. So that is definitely something that's put in place. What is happening and what has to happen is it needs to be driven, hosted continuously, and I know that CIPC works very hard and at the key forefront of their objectives is training, and that is one of the areas that we can focus on. Awapi, for example, they have their own master's program. This is in collaboration with WIPO and the University of Yaoundé. And this really just highlights the importance of providing that master's program and upskilling parties involved in infringement and enforcement measures in dealing with IP rights. In addition to training, we've seen it go to another level where we're working with online and what mechanisms are taking place, and where we are seeing the support not only from cross-African countries but also international role players. So with the Cybercrimes Bill and Act, looking at Nigeria and South Africa that are in place, what is good to see is actually a situation where we can see the EU offering support to SAP, South African Police Services, in developing their unit and the expertise in dealing with cybercrimes and also IP infringements. In Namibia, we've got the 2015 and the South African 2018 Cybercrime Bill. And the other aspects where we've seen the increase, we spoke about the online marketplace, and we have mentioned that half of those have some complaint procedures in place. There has also been developments in dealing with the takedown notices, and we can proudly say that in Kenya it is working, in South Africa and Namibia, with use of the local legislation in the form of the Electronic Communication and Transactions Act in South Africa, the Electronic Transactions Act in Namibia, and the Copyright Amendment Act in Kenya. So these are all advancements that are in place. We're now seeing a situation where domain name disputes can be dealt with at a country level domain, where we're dealing with the .za, the KE, in countries such as South Africa, Kenya, Botswana, Nigeria, Morocco, and Egypt. So there is a tendency in growth to actually put those mechanisms in place to deal with online.
Yeah, fantastic. So you see a lot of progress on the continent, sorry. Then, Vanessa, technological measures.
Yeah, this is another area, and it was quite exciting to be part of the AJS launch of the app in South Africa. And this is an example where technology is being used as tools to combat anti-counterfeiting. We're dealing with a scenario where there's a vast majority of law enforcement who don't have data, who have connectivity issues, etc. So finding those tools and putting those tools in place that can support anti-counterfeiting and enforcement measures are so important. In looking at AJS from a South African perspective, the objective in having a data management and one key area where we can start logging cases, collecting data, a huge aspect is the lack of statistics. It's very difficult for us to actually set down firm statistics on the effect and the cost value. So yes, from a point of view, you can go and speak to various brand holders and say, what are the costing to you? But having a tool who can measure that and measure that is important. Where we're looking at Africa, the use of cell phones, of smartphones is really important. So just looking at numbers, in Nigeria, for example, most people have 3 cell phones because they will be working on the different networks. But the majority of Africans, 3/4 of Africans, have mobile phones, and 250 million of these have smartphones. So it's definitely a commodity that can be used for technological advances, and we've seen it happening. So for example, in Mali, it was the introduction of a system of SMS verification codes, where you can actually get a code and you can send it through for verification whether the goods are original or not. The same with Kenya, who incorporated the use of the QR codes on excise stamps. And Nigeria has probably been one of the territories where they have had success in a lot of the technological measures. Key area which is focused on is pharmaceutical products, where you can actually go and identify it quickly by use of scanning on the phone. So this is definitely an area where we have seen development. Yes, does development still have to take place? Without a doubt. So introduction of scratch cards for pharmaceutical products, radio frequency identification codes, and mobile authentication services are the main leaders in these technological measures.
Fantastic. Yes, and then, as I said already earlier, for us in South Africa and Mauritius, customs are our best ally when it comes to fighting counterfeits. But that's unfortunately not the case everywhere on the continent. So during the study for the book, Vanessa and I found out that there are only really a handful of countries that allow a formal customs recordal procedure as we know it in South Africa and Mauritius. And that besides South Africa and Mauritius, that's of course Kenya, Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. They have this really formal customs recordal in place. In other African countries, you can work together with customs either by concluding a memorandum of understanding or further to a court decision or the like. So there will be cooperation possibilities with customs, and we have highlighted them here on the map. That's Senegal, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, Egypt, Tanzania, and Mozambique. So that's the conclusion that we've drawn. There are countries that provide actually by law, by statute for customs recordal, but where it's not at all practical and where it has just never happened. And if you try to make it happen, it'll not work. So that's the situation here. Then when it comes to legal remedies, we have identified the countries where courts are more or less aware and have more or less an understanding of the technical questions that arise together with IP. So as you all know, it's not easy to assess, in patent disputes, even in trademark disputes, what is a trademark that is distinctive? When is there a risk of confusion? It's not that easy. So it requires some technical understanding from the judges. Now, unfortunately, in Africa, there are not yet any specialized court for IP. So really IP specialized courts. The only country that is looking to introducing that is Kenya. But I would definitively recommend to countries like South Africa and other, more advanced countries, economies, to look into the institution of specialized IP courts, because, that is something that has worked very well in the EU, in North America, and is really required because these IP rights are sometimes really technical. And so you get better decisions if you have a specialized judge. So really something to look into in the future. One recommendation to take away for countries as well. And that are the positive developments. And now we come already to the takeaways, not for countries, but for right holders. And we would like to provide you with 15 tips and tricks that you can take away from this presentation. Vanessa.
So first and foremost, and we discussed it, that sometimes things can take long. Registration can be a lengthy process. And we see that from a law enforcement position as well, where we're waiting for a trademark to proceed to registration. So our advice to the brand holders is take this into account. File trademarks ahead of the time. Try and read the scope and look at it cross borders, and take into account that the goods are finding their ways into the neighboring territories. So encouraging brand holders to invest into the protection measures is important. As I mentioned, some are slow, but not all. Rwanda, for example, you can get a trademark registration quicker than the USA. There should also be a situation in looking at it and saying, if you're waiting for the trademark, what common law rights, is there well-known protection? We had Chris Job speaking to us earlier on the protection of well-known trademarks and how it plays a part. So it's necessary to understand in Africa which countries respect and protect common law rights and well-known trademarks, so that those can be relied on. Another strategy that we've seen that is applied a lot in Africa is copycat products, where they don't necessarily just copy the trademark. They might use a different trademark, but they will mimic and copy the get-up of the product. So making sure that you're protecting those to prevent any unscrupulous parties from using it. And we can see it from an anti-counterfeiting perspective, where you dealing and trying to base it on a registered trademark, but they're not using the mark itself, but the get-up. Having those rights in place, I mean, we would be able to take a lot more action. Looking at the two regional systems that are at play, yesterday we had a good discussion on a repo and RP and involvement. They need to carefully have a look at it from an enforcement perspective and also proactivity in which countries. Should you be proceeding nationally or filing on a regional basis? And then just the final point in looking at is looking at the online marketplace. Understanding where you might, for example, have to have a right, like for example, a domain name. So in countries where you might have a scenario where there needs to be a use requirement, or alternatively dealing with it that you need some form of base right or something that you can deal with, registering a domain name, which is a lot quicker, can also assist.
Yeah, fantastic. You also need to take into account cross-border distribution and trade routes in Africa, because it's not as straightforward as you may think. We have already talked about the example of Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a landlocked country. Many of the goods imported into Ethiopia come through the port of Djibouti. So if you have an IP strategy in place in Ethiopia, you must not forget about Djibouti. Say you are manufacturing products in Ethiopia and export them through Djibouti, you don't want to be blocked in Djibouti. So register your trademark not only in Ethiopia, where production and exporting is considered trademark use, but also in Djibouti, because otherwise some smart copycat may try to block you there. The same reasoning applies to, to give you another example, to Nigeria. We already discussed, it's the #1 economy in Africa now, but most surprisingly, many products that are sold in Nigeria are actually not at all imported through the ports of Nigeria. Why? Because there's a huge backlog there. It goes very slowly, the importation process, and there's huge taxes there in Nigeria. So many traders actually prefer to bring in the goods through the green border of Benin and Togo. So that means that if you have a project there in place, well, you don't want to only register your trademark or your other intellectual property rights in Nigeria, but also in the neighboring OAPI countries, just to be sure that you can secure that supply route. So really, that's something you need to take into account in your Africa strategy.
And just taking up from a point of view is following up on the registration procedures. If we look at a point of keeping a record of all the instructions, corruption, as I previously mentioned, does play a role. In some cases, there might be a false filing, so request the official documentation. Have that paper trail that is in place. We are lucky that we are seeing an increased amount of intellectual property attorneys and specialists in Africa, but care should be taken in trying to, and looking at who you're going to be appointing or dealing with in foreign jurisdictions. Do the homework, and also make sure that you follow up well in advance. So if there is a renewal of a trademark that's due, from that perspective, make sure that you contact the legal agent, because they can also disappear without any trace, without any notice. So keeping an eye on that is important.
Exactly. That's what Vanessa already said. You have to make sure to keep a clear paper trail of the instructions, keep copies of the payment receipts. There have been scandals in many African countries where corrupt agents have been sharing the filing fees with the officials in the registries, and no trademark was ever filed. That has been a big problem in Nigeria. So it's really important that you keep the paper trail. There's also corrupt agents who have cashed in a lot of money. That has been a big problem, probably many of you remember, in Cameroon. So really keep the paper trail. Also, unfortunately, many of these IP registers in Africa are still in paper format. So, and who says paper format says that, of course, something can happen to these registers. There can be a fire, a flood, a storm, civil unrest, and the like, and the register can perish. And then it happens, and it happens actually quite a lot, that right holders are asked to reconstitute the file and to provide copies of all these documents. So really, it is important that you have the paper trail in place.
And just be wary of the use requirements. During the training today, we looked at, and yesterday, looking at the rights and the duration of the rights. One of the aspects to look at is that a trademark is vulnerable to cancellation if it hasn't been used for a certain period of time. In South Africa, we deal with a 5-year period. Some countries will deal with a 3-year. So we need to actually make a point and make sure that trademarks are being used, that they are not vulnerable to attack. Have a look at from a point of view of dealing with well-known trademarks. Make sure that you have sufficient evidence that supports the mark and confirms it to be well-known in the territory. Chris Jobo was mentioning earlier today on the well-known aspect, but you've got to prove that that mark is well-known because you don't have that certificate. Defensive registrations are available in some countries, not all. Some examples where you can file a defensive registration, and that's a trademark where, for example, you can get a registration even though you don't intend using it. So you would then use that trademark or register that trademark to defend and stop other people from going into that territory. And countries there are Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Seychelles, for example. Another aspect to look at is licensing requirements. There are specific and different terms and procedures and requirements for licensing of trademarks and intellectual property rights in specific countries. So making sure that the use takes place and also the recordal of that license and compliance with the requirement in that country. So just a tip there to make sure that that can be relied on. And don't forget about the copyrighted works. This morning where I was concentrating on that and saying if we haven't got a trademark registration, in Africa there is copyright protection. Let's focus on trying to enforce those copyrighted works in cases where we might, for example, be waiting for the registration of a trademark logo, which also happens to be a copyrighted work.
Exactly. Yes, and then unfortunately you have to always be at the lookout for trademark trolls. I don't say it's an African specificity, but unfortunately there are certain African countries where there are more trademark trolls and scammers than in other countries. And I mean, they tend to take advantage of certain national particularities. Give you the example of Madagascar. In Madagascar, there's no opposition procedure. And so if you want no administrative action for cancellation of a trademark in front of the register. So if you want to take action against a trademark that is registered, then you need to take a court action. And that can take, in Madagascar, very, very long. And some trademark trolls know that. So they will just file well-known trademarks there and wait until the rightful owner of the right wants to do business in Madagascar, and then they will confront them with this reality and propose a deal. It's just as simple as that. And there are other instances. We just had a case in Nigeria where somebody went ahead and registered our client's trademark against a bribe because the trademark was opposed. Despite the opposition, the person got a trademark registration certificate, so clearly against a bribe, and then went to a judge and obtained an ant-and-pillar order and carried away original products from our client's distributor. So these situations exist. Well, luckily the man is in prison now since 2 years, but it's a very uncomfortable situation. So you have to look out for this and look at the registers. So most trademark owners or right holders have a watch notice in place, but also regularly have a look at company registers and the like. So just be careful of what's happening in the register so that you are in time to take action against these trademark trolls.
So dealing in enforcement of IP rights, it's not for sissies. We've got to deal with pirates and trolls. So if we're looking at anticipating requests from enforcement agencies, it's not unusual for enforcement agencies to come and approach and say, can you assist with logistics? Can you assist with transport? Can you please assist with the operations? And this is something that we have to keep in the forefront and make brand holders aware that the amount of money that needs to be spent and also involvement might be more than expected because of those requirements on covering logistics.
Okay, and then we talked already about corruption. So it can happen that you get an unfavorable or surprising decision in some jurisdictions. And then here our advice would be to see it through, to appeal to a higher court. And that can very often, turn around the situation again. Why is that so? Because, of course, the first instance court is a proximity judge. Huh? You know that the so the case has to be filed at the place where the infringement has taken place or at the domicile of the defendant. And so there can be a certain proximity between the judge and the counterfeiter, and there can thus be some influence, let me put it like this, on the judge. This will be less the case with appeal court judges. Why? Because many times they are more educated judges, many times they are in another city, often in the capital, and many times there will be also 3 judges sitting on appeal, and then it is, of course, more difficult to influence these 3 judges than 1 judge. So really, we do recommend not to be discouraged and to see it through.
And I think it just follows from that point of view. We've got to be committed to the long-term enforcement strategy. There is no such thing as the quick fix. We need to have as many of these matters being driven through law enforcement to the prosecution levels, so that when we arrive and we bring a new case before the prosecutors, they're confident, they've got precedents, and we can deal with the matter of trying to at least get the better fines. I mean, as we discussed, in getting an imprisonment, although we actually got those rights, we've got the rights to ask for a substantial amount of a fine and imprisonment, but this isn't being dealt with through the courts. So we need to commit to a long-term enforcement strategy so that we can build up those precedents and confidence.
Absolutely. And then, if ever possible, our recommendation is to consider criminal enforcement. We've already seen in most African countries, except 1, criminal sanctions are available to trademark and copyright infringements. So really, if possible, consider this when there is a health and safety risk, when there is regulated products at stake, then there may be other criminal laws that can apply, for example, counterfeit medicine, alcohol, tobacco, and the like. So really take this into account, because it is really deterrent to the counterfeiters. Yeah.
And following the trail of the goods, as we said, we've got to look and understand the dynamics. Where are the goods coming into? What are the main ports? What are the landlocked countries? What are the transit routes that have been there for years? There's cross-border trade routes that have developed over centuries and that still exist in Africa. We need to understand this, and we need to look cross-border, because we might be having a concern in one country, but it might be easier to be dealt with if we're actually following those goods. If we're looking at the country, for example, where the goods are landed at the port, in changing the tactic there and saying, yes, I'm seeing a problem in Nigeria, but these goods are not coming through Nigerian custom. They're coming through Togo, Benin. How can we deal with it at that point, instead of actually trying to deal with it in a marketplace where there isn't any customs enforcement or support that's required?
And then, Vanessa talked about these really difficult situations where right holders are confronted by, requests from authorities to support investigations by money, by petrol, by paper, and of course, this is problematic for European, North American companies who have transparency rules to respect. So they cannot sometimes engage in this kind of partnership or whatever you want to call it. And there may thus be a deadlock situation where the authorities say, well, if you don't give us petrol and vehicles, we can't go in that area of the country. And the right holder says, well, but then we just can't work with you, and because we can't do that for transparency reasons. And I have seen instances, where counterfeit medicine was continued to be sold because there was no understanding. And what we then recommended to the client is to engage diplomatic channels. There's always an embassy, American, French, European delegation in every country. There's now a lot of IP attachés across Africa, and they are a port of call, and they can help unblock these situations. Let's say in the case of these counterfeit pharmaceuticals, by giving a telephone call to the Minister of Health and saying, look, there is this problem. We have these counterfeit pharmaceuticals. The authorities would like to help us, but there's this and this issue. How can we resolve it? And that helps. So please keep in mind the diplomatic channels. Do engage them. They are there to assist companies. And so please don't hesitate to involve them.
And it's also great to see how the embassies are involved in supporting the training initiatives. Then just ensure a proactive protection strategy, relying on the local eyes and ears. It's usually the local business, the importers, the distributors, etc., that know the marketplace. So encouraging, supporting and training internal workforce to support in the identification.
Yes, then cooperate with customs whenever it's possible. We've shown you the list of countries where you can really engage with a formal application, and we've shown you the countries where some cooperation is possible. So do it, participate in training events, explain to the officers how to recognize counterfeit and pirated goods. Really, this cooperation can only be very fruitful. And what is fantastic to see that with this pandemic, we have increasingly engaged in online training. So right holders no longer have to fly all the way from Paris, London, New York to train authorities. They can do that online. I think that is a great advantage. I also think that it's important to meet every now and then, because there are things that you can only say when you are, face to face. And also, working with the authorities is also building trust and confidence in one another. The authorities need to know that you're serious as a right holder about enforcing your rights, and vice versa. So, that can only be done by really physical interaction, meetings on the ground. But, even in the pandemic, we've did the best. And so hopefully these customs trainings on the ground do resume again very soon. So, but I encourage everybody to engage in cooperation with customs. And this is our last slide. I don't know really, Vanessa, is it yours or is it mine? We want to encourage everybody to share knowledge, build capacities. And that's one of the reasons why Vanessa and I are always enthusiastic to participate in this type of conferences, seminars, and why we have written actually this book to share our knowledge, because we are not afraid of, sharing what we have so that others can make use of that information. We are not at all afraid of that. To the contrary, we believe that, by sharing it, we make it bigger, we create more dynamics, and we will have even more cases to report in the next edition of the book. Vanessa, I'm sure you want to add something here.
Yeah, and I think it's an open invitation. We see knowledge as not necessarily a competitive advantage. Knowledge grows people. And encouraging other people and other countries to share and grow that knowledge. Having those, we talked about collaborative efforts, working with other countries, and actually going and working together and actually bringing it together and making a stronger workforce. And I think that brings us to the end of the presentation. It's very difficult to squeeze the whole of Africa into just over an hour, especially when you're across the oceans. But, you know,
absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, both of you. You are receiving rounds of applause from Mozambique, from Cabo Verde, from Manchester University, from Lisbon, and from the Artists Association of Cabo Verde, who are all watching you. And they thank you tremendously. And they say they learned immensely, and everyone wants you to go to their places to teach. So let's make a list. Okay.
Yeah, we're coming.
That was tremendously informative. I will channel all these comments to you after the conference on Friday. Thank you so much. We could not be more enlightened than we were. It was really, really amazing. I have a couple of comments, more than questions, that I will send to you both afterwards. And I thank you so much for your presentation. Truly, truly amazing, impressive. Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you, Marius, and thank you for joining us and giving us so much time and knowledge. We will now leave for a 10-minute comfort break, and then we will come back with the supply chain. A round of applause in Cape Town for Vanessa and Mauritius. Thank you so much.
Hello, it's a pleasure to see you finally
Yes,
and to
I've
get to
heard
know you.
about you. I've heard
I
about
have
you.
to. Very good, thank you. Paul, I have to say I'm a little bit jealous about the amazing background you have. Compared to my background, it looks a little bit boring, like my background compared to.
Well,
I was
Felix,
talking-
I'm stuck in a hotel suite in Dubai, downtown Dubai at the moment. So that is home, actually. That's just down the road in Switzerland where I live. Yes, but
I love the mountains.
better than my hotel backdrop. Yeah.
Well,
My
I was
hotel room.
supposed to be on stage in Cape Town, and I'm not because I wasn't able to manage the flight. So we've all got our,
Oh,
our
sure.
issues.
Where are you, Linda?
I'm in my front room in Lisbon.
In Lisbon. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
I can guarantee the two of you have better weather than I do, because I'm calling from Germany, Nuremberg.
Oh,
And,
The cold.
well, yeah, you know, that's the difference between winter and summer. During summertime, the rain is warmer.
Yeah, yes, true. So we should be starting soon.
Linda, were we going to try and keep to the finished time, original finish time, or
Yes,
would
we're
we
going
need
to try and keep it to the time. I'm going to speak to Happy, who is already on stage. I can see her from here, and I will ask her if we can keep to the finish time. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I've just got another meeting. I'm sorry. I do
I
have a
know,
hard
no,
stop.
no,
I
no.
apologize.
Absolutely.
Yep. And Felix, if you don't mind me asking, where are you? What company are you from, please?
Orion, that's the startup basically we founded last year. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to most likely give an introduction about Orion anyway
Sure.
and about me. But what we do is we monitor supply chains for human rights violations based on publicly available information like reports from NGOs, but as well like news blogs and social media. So I would say we use similar methods when I've seen this correctly from your website.
Okay.
But I can explain it later on.
Sure. Oh, great. Yeah.
Okay,
'Cause
gentlemen, we're
yeah,
waiting to
sorry.
go live now. So I would suggest that we wait a little bit now.
Sure.
I'm just waiting for the go ahead. So can everybody hear me? in the room? Are we ready to go live? Technician.
You need to just reach down there and tap Amanda on the shoulder, Linda.
Yes, I'm just dying to do exactly that. You know, it feels like she's right there. I need the technician to give me the go ahead. Sorry, guys. It's all very nice, but I'm absolutely in love with live. Live is great. They're ignoring me. Why are they ignoring me? Oh, I can see Tess, so something, they're moving. It's a good thing I can see the room, so I have kind of control.
Also mine. And a picture. I mean, she takes the pictures for me. Oh, she does the pictures. Yeah.
Okay, are we live
Scroll
now?
down.
Are we live now?
Linda, sorry
Yes.
for my interrupting. We are ready to roll.
Thank you.
We are going to say 3, 2, 1, then you can announce Happy,
Yes.
and she's going to announce the
Yes,
panelists.
Tess,
So
we
did read
need
it right?
Tess, we need to shorten this to the scheduled time. Please see my
No,
messages.
the scheduled time is a typo. So how much time? What's our limit?
That would be Paul. What's your limit? Paul, I can't hear you.
Paul. He needs to
Can't hear
unmute
you.
himself.
You're
1:30, just I have a meeting at 4:30 your time, so we have an hour and a half, just
okay.
under an hour and a half. Is that okay?
Yeah.
For me, anyway.
Thank you. Happy, are you hearing that? Okay, hour and a half. I'm sure we don't need that much time.
No,
but
we don't need that. Okay.
We can, okay.
Okay,
Right.
count me down then. 3, 2, 1.
Sarah, 3, 2, 1, and we are live.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you had a great lunch, and think of us poor ones who haven't had lunch yet. So I hope you enjoyed your lunch and you feel tremendously guilty that we haven't had lunch yet. So we had an amazing first session, very, very enthusiastically received. We are being followed not only by Cape Town and various people everywhere, but also in Mozambique, in Cabo Verde, in Manchester, in Lisbon and Angola, who joined us today as well with an auditorium. So in total, from an update I had during the coffee break, we have 1,374 people in auditorium. So this is 60% of which are students. So this is really, really, really important. So thank you so much for coming back, and Happy, thank you for moderating this session. I want to introduce you to your moderator. This session is focused on the supply chain, and it's going to give you insights as to why counterfeit goods are a threat to the supply chain and what the challenges are affecting in-country supply chains and African governments seemingly diminished accountability. So we're going to talk about supply chain here. So you have a tough job, but a fabulously empowered and knowledgeable panel. So this should go very, very well. Our moderator is Mrs. Happy Makumolo Ngidi, who is a graduate in communications and is in the middle of completing her international relations degree. She joined South African as a CMO in 2015 to head up the organization's marketing and communications department. As a PR and communications professional, she has over 20 years of corporate experience. She also has extensive experience in driving strategy development, turnaround strategies, as well as brand and product management for a number of multinational and local brands in hospitality, marketing, and the broadcasting services sector. And we are very happy to have her with us today. So Happy, over to you. Please take charge and introduce your panel.
Thank you so much, Linda. Let me tell you two things. The one is that we're very sorry that you haven't had your lunch. We just had a local lunch and it was lekker, right? And secondly, I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to keep up to your lovely energy. And today I'm glad that I'm not getting the graveyard shift. Yesterday it was just before lunch. It wasn't easy, but I think I'm in a better space today. So thank you so much, everybody. Welcome back. It's great to have you here. And before we introduce the panelists, I must just say that from a South African perspective, we know that the Minister of Finance is busy doing the things as we speak with the budget presentation now. So hopefully all goes well and it'll do good for our rand, which will be fantastic. So today's discussion is obviously supply chain, and we are looking at diminishing accountability, anti-counterfeiting, a collective responsibility that goes without saying, and why counterfeit goods are a threat to the supply chain and challenges affecting in-country supply chains and also hopefully look at the context of local as well. And as introduced, I'm Happy Ngidi. I'm from Proudly South African. I'm pleased to be here today. And on the line, actually I want to change the game because I can. We're the only two roses sitting up here that are not connected live. So I'll start with Amanda. So Amanda is a great friend of the Proudly South African campaign. We've come a long way, and when Amanda said, please show up and come participate, I was like, I'm there. You never say no to her, those that know her. And so Senior Manager, Copyright and IP Enforcement from CIPC, that sits within the DTIC, almost 29 years with the DTIC, if my calculations are not going to let me down. Started in 1993.
Perfect.
There we go.
You can do math.
I'm not sleeping on the job. That's for sure. And we've come a long way, like I say. And you've come a long way. Wealth of knowledge. I saw you do your thing yesterday. Very impressive. So much to say about you, Amanda. Your CV reads like a book. I'll never be able to go through all of that, but great to be here and speaking to you today. I'll come back to you just now. Yako is on the line. Yako is Group Forensics Manager at Clicks Group. Are you there, Yako? Hello, there you are. You look like the guy I was stalking on LinkedIn. It's you, right? Fantastic. Hello, Yako. Certified ethics. Good, thank you. You're the certified ethics officer. I feel like you're the police because you're a specialist detective investigating all major crime groups, prominent cases. I saw you in the paper. I mean, it's a combo. Like I said, I feel like you're the police. Great to have you with us this afternoon, and we look forward to having a chat with you.
Thanks so much, Happy.
Fantastic. Thanks, Yako. And we're also joined virtually by Felix Till.
Hello, Happy.
Hello, Felix. Hi. How are you doing out there you're in Switzerland, am I correct?
I'm in Germany. Well, it's nearby Switzerland, so that's
No,
okay.
not.
I'm in Nuremberg.
All right, I wasn't too far off. You were somewhere out there.
Somewhere out there, exactly, in rainy Europe.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Felix Till is CEO of Oren.
Orien, if I may correct you.
Orien, there we go. I'm a Zulu girl, Felix.
Yeah,
All the way from Soweto.
I guarantee you, if I have pronounced Zulu words, I'm going to struggle as well.
And you're an entrepreneur, a profession I have the utmost respect for. And your company provides automated tools to discover human rights violation in supply chain companies, yes? Okay.
That's correct.
And you started this company following your passion for fairness and technology. Am I correct?
That's correct as well.
Fabulous. All right, you keep nodding, so I'm on the right track, which is fantastic. And I believe you're a sports fanatic.
Well, I used to be more than I'm nowadays. Nowadays, the company keeps me more busy, so the time for hobbies is getting slimmer and slimmer. But yeah, when I find time, I enjoy this a lot.
Okay. And football team? Arsenal? Man U?
No, it's not. It's weightlifting, actually.
Okay. Fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us, Felix. And last but not least, we have Paul Vitali.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hello, Paul. Hi, hello there. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. So Paul is VP
Pleasure.
Business Development for Verify Me. Verify Me is your company name, yeah?
It is. That's the company name, yes.
Okay, Verify Me. And you have worked with SMEs and startups for over 25 years. Have very good knowledge of supply chain and blockchain technology, as you can imagine. Yes, that's what that's the kind of vibe that I get from what I read up.
Absolutely, yes.
Fantastic. Let me tell you this, that if I were to spend more time on all of your CVs, we would still not be done. So I acknowledge the fact that this is an edited version of what you've done. I come from the broadcasting world, and I've had to learn how to, to navigate CVs without doing any injustice to them. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. So we'll get straight into it. And where I want to start is, so we're talking supply chain, and I'm going to credit CIPC for this, because you say in your data that in its simplest form, a supply chain is the activities required by the organization to deliver goods or services to the consumer. And what is the main goal of supply chain management? The goal of supply chain management is to look holistically at the entire supply chain from supplier through to the consumer, and review 3 core areas of people, process, and systems in order to maximize value from all activities. Once again, from the CIPC archives. And supply chain includes not only raw material inputs required to produce a company's core business product, but all those items used in the day-to-day running of the business. So, Amanda, your stance as CIPC in regards to supply chain management.
Thank you, Happy. And I'm happy to be part of this panel. I'm also happy South African, just to stress that. The unit that I'm responsible for deals with the intellectual property enforcement. And we look at the weaknesses in supply chains. And what we have seen since the pandemic struck us in 2020, that supply chains has come under tremendous threats. It has actually moved from physical situations to virtual supply chains, and companies had to adapt. They faced uniquely different situations to deliver their goods from their manufacturing plants to their end consumers. And one of the examples that we dealt with from the enforcement unit's perspective is the delivery of newspapers, for instance. Suddenly, in March 2020, when we were all locked down, people had to find ways to read the news. And in that stage, papers were delivered by hand at their houses, but suddenly it was made available online. Now, with making printed media available online comes an array of intellectual property rights that can be contravened if not dealt with correctly. So those are some of the examples that we deal with in the unit of enforcement in regard to supply chains, and that's only one example. The other things we faced with is the delivery of medicines, for instance, and the delivery of other goods and services bought online. Yeah. We heard in the previous session that Vanessa stated categorically that she hasn't shopped online until the pandemic hit us. I can second that. So suddenly you've got a number of new consumers shopping online, and our approach to supply chains just differs and changed dramatically.
And I can relate to what you just said now about shopping online for the first time when the pandemic hit us. I was one of those. I hated shopping online before that, but with the pandemic, one had no choice, right? So in the context of what you've just said, I want to find out from Felix. Felix, your day-to-day responsibility. You walk into the office and then what?
And then most likely I have the next catastrophe because something in the software is not working. So,
Right.
Therefore, I think I need to explain a little bit what Arian is doing. So Arian is monitoring supply chains for big companies for human rights violations. And we do this by automatically process like approximately 300,000 reports per day, only in English, at the beginning, where there are reports about human rights violations. Why is this significant? Because intellectual property rights violation and human rights violation act quite similarly from the effects and as well from the detection. If you want to detect this, usually you talk about something that you need to find locally in the place. So it's quite difficult actually to really say, is it an IP violation or is it not? On the other hand, from the effect, what does it cause and why is it harmful? It does two things in the end, and that's quite relevant for big companies that are our users. It increases transactional costs and it creates uncertainty. And uncertainty is the number one thing that supply chain managers want to avoid. If you have a cross-company supply chain, cross-country supply chain, what you want is reliability. Because in the end, many times companies are involved in multi-company supply chains. And if you have a delay on one end, you're going to delay everything that is behind this. How companies try to deal with that is they try to automate this monitoring as much as possible. And there we come to play. What we do is actually we provide them with report attentions like, hey, there is a report of violation. You should reach out to your vendor if this is actually true, and how the vendor can find the remedy. I'm going to come to this, like why a remedy. And the second point is we give a risk assessment in what region, in what product class is a violation for human rights violation the most likely. But this is quite similar to intellectual property rights violation. Intellectual property rights violations, many times when you see something like in street markets, when you go to Cairo, or if you're in Cape Town or something like this, and you see it all the day that you see like fake brands and so on. And you might think like, why is it such a big deal? The problem in the end is it can lead to the fact that the likelihood for violations for the whole region, for the whole country increases, and big corporates say like, I simply don't do business with you because the risk is too high for me. And that's what we do. Talking about like software glitches, obviously what we do, like you said it correctly, I have a passion for technology. So what we use is a method of machine learning. And machine learning basically is a buzzword. And I don't like it really a lot. What we really do is we use statistical approaches. So we look like where is it the most likely, and where does a text say most likely this company is involved, this person is involved. And then it's up to the company that hires us to reach out to them. So that's my day-to-day work. I hope it became a little bit more transparent.
Yes, it is. You're a busy guy.
Well, sometimes.
All right, thanks a lot. Hang 10, we'll be back and bring you more into the conversation. So Jaco, your company's stance in regards to the discussion here today, what is it?
Okay, your mic is very soft. Happy, can you just repeat that question again?
All right. So can you hear me better now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, fantastic. So my question is, in the context of what we're talking about today, give us an insight into what your stance is and what you do and what your take is.
Well, Happy, I'm the forensics manager for a big retail group, and I'm also the chairperson of a pharmaceutical crime task group. It was an initiative that we have started in South Africa in 2016. And in that stage, there was a need in the pharmaceutical, specifically in the pharmaceutical industry for big brands to network so that we can sit around the table and talk crime. Now, if you look at, if you look at data released in 2019 by the OECD, illicit trade and pirated goods, and that was data based on, seizure data through, global customs seizures came down to 3.3% of world trade, and that's not even, defined as pharmaceuticals only. I think that number is quite low. I think it's only the tip of the iceberg, and there's much more happening behind the scenes. I mean, if you look at this, syndicates trading counterfeit goods and counterfeit pharmaceuticals, they are organized. And I think in the South Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa contents, I think that number is too low. I think incidents are not properly, reported, data are not well tracked, consolidated, and documented. So my thought is that, counterfeiters have found a way into a legitimate supply chains. It's not, it's no longer confined to street corners, trunks of the cars, flea markets. We have seen a massive drive in e-commerce and other social media platforms in the sales of counterfeit, pharmaceuticals, and it's only increasing by the day.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jaco. And before we dive, into a bigger discussion about this, I want to talk to Paul and ask
Hi,
you,
Happy.
Paul. Hi, hello, Paul. So what is the main goal of supply chain management in your world, in your perspective?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we work with IP lawyers, IP directors, directly working with brands. We also work with supply chain managers and directors, and we see where the breakdown is across the board. It's Jaco was just talking then about the percentages of counterfeit and seizures, and I have to be honest, those figures seem vastly underestimated, because based on our experience, chain representatives and IP lawyers with some of the larger brands, we're getting figures of really between about 10 and 15% on average of counterfeit products, and how it's affecting their revenue, how the supply chain breaks down immediately, goods not being able to get through customs, not having the right ability or the right technology to authenticate products in a suitable manner. The great point from Jaco again about how complex and how clever these counterfeiters are these days. No longer can we maybe just put static QR codes on something so you could make a little scan. It's all about really covert and hidden and invisible tech now that is, as far as we're concerned, enabling brands to protect themselves more, to get the supply chain uninhibited through to the right distribution outlets. And not only counterfeit, but diversion and grey market and overproduction. It's very difficult to put them in different silos. They are really interconnected. Just in the same way that a 15% counterfeit issue is going to be a company's biggest competition. Never mind. As I say, never mind their own competition. Counterfeit in certain circumstances is a company's biggest competition. But also that grey market and parallel trading and trying to understand how on earth products have ended up, could be a genuine product, just ended up in the wrong place. And it's been sold, undermined, local distribution is being undermined, and that whole chain then breaks down. Confidence is erased, brand loyalty is erased, it's got a knock-on effect. And we as a company, Verify Me, are among with many other companies in this sector, we are trying our best to come up with innovative ways, innovative technology, unique patented tech to stay ahead of the game, to stay ahead of the counterfeiters, to be one better than them at all times. And if we do a good job, we can open up those supply chains. We can get the tech into the right hands. If it's breaking down on a country basis or at customs level, or it's about getting the tech into the customs inspectors. If it's breaking down on an internal distribution model with distributors, it's about making sure that that track and trace element of a serialized product is working well, and the touch points along that supply chain are adhered to and respected, so that you do know where your products are at all times. So that's kind of our aim, our game, and trying to stay ahead of the technology curve with the counterfeiters. But I can only reiterate Jaco's statement there that the counterfeiters are becoming very, very sophisticated, and we have to be even more innovative than ever.
Fantastic. We have got to find a way to be a step ahead, which is where I want to bring you in, Amanda. So what are we going to do, Amanda? Whether as a country, as a collective, or as the globe, how are we going to even begin to deal with the threat that is clearly, problematic and persistent?
Yeah. Now, I don't think we have easy answers, but there's definitely eyes and ears needed through our public. So we need to make sure that we upped our education and awareness, we change behavior of our consumers, and we make sure that they understand what a secure supply chain means for them as the end user. So that's also where we are most active. We work very closely with industry. I use the example of the newspapers. So our Publishing Association of South Africa came to the CIPC saying, you need to stop it. People are sharing these content illegally online all the time through social media, digital IP, and what do we do about it? And in many instances, our consumers doesn't realize, especially with the copyright protected material, that when they start sharing this and it's not obtained through legitimate supply chain processes like streaming services, that's all legal. They are aiding and abetting a crime, for instance, or infringing on intellectual property rights. So for us, making sure that we raise the level of awareness of the public out there to understand, if you order medicines online and you get it delivered to your doorstep, is this the authentic product, or was somewhere in the supply chain it intercepted and swapped with something different? So consumers also that they buy, so that they are informed. And this is where the track and trace solutions come into play that Paul is talking about. It's important for consumers to understand what are the value of scanning the goods that they've actually purchased, and how do they ensure that it's a supply chain that they can trust when it eventually lands up on their front doorsteps.
Yeah. And and I would imagine that even our audience who's listening to us now is that they would agree to some extent, is that as a consumer, I almost feel like I don't want to be given a job to have to do. Like you say, if somebody delivers medicine at your house, the last thing on your mind is to try and figure out, where it's coming from, whether it's legit or, because you're dealing with the pain. Nothing else matters, which is, in fact, in the context of the work that we do, people will say, I do want to support local, but when I go to a retail store, how do I know a product is local? And we say to them, look out for the country of origin, but that's a job for a consumer. So surely there must be easier ways that we can use, to try and educate, our audiences as much as we possibly can. Paul? Yes? No?
Yeah, I think maybe it's trying to educate. Maybe this is something that could be done, through TV blasts or something, where your government gets involved to try and help educate people. Just to say, look, this takes 20 seconds. Don't forget, 1 million people a year die from fake pharmaceuticals. If it's going in your body or on your body, you need to make sure that it's a genuine thing, whether that's a cooking oil that you're cooking your food in, or whether it's a pharmaceutical product or a cosmetic that you're putting on your face, or it's a shampoo you're using on your hair, or it's some eye drops that you're putting in your eyes. I mean, this is critical. It's critical that you've got the genuine product, and it is becoming the QR code and ability to scan, it is becoming a little bit more ubiquitous now. People are getting used to seeing codes, but we just have to keep educating, say, look, it's only going to take 20 seconds. Once you've used your QR code, you know where it is on your smartphone. It becomes much easier to use next time. Check your products out, look at that supply chain. And as I say, the counterfeiters are getting smarter. Not only are counterfeiters copying a visible QR code and replicating it, so we use intelligent learning and algorithms that make sure if codes are copied and then scanned in the wrong region or in the wrong country, it will flag with an alert to say this product could be counterfeited because it's in the wrong region. We are geolocating where you're making the scan, it's in the wrong region. But sometimes what tends to happen now is counterfeiters are downloading thousands of genuine codes from a QR code production site and simply pointing that code at fake websites. So in all sense and purposes, it looks like a genuine code, but you're just looking at instead of looking at Siemens or Pfizer, you're looking at Pfizer spelt with 3 Z's in the middle, and it's all a fake website. So you have to use intelligent information and monitoring of these websites within that code platform that obviously Verify Me and other people do supply as well, to make sure that those sites are locked down, they're struck off, and that when you read a code, or whatever that reference would be, it's a unique serialized reference that cannot be multiply copied and used erroneously and on counterfeit product. And it's not. It is only codes. There are other ways of marking products with invisible inks and tagant and microtext and all those kind of things. And companies do have to look at these options that are available to them. Yeah. But I think it is a widespread education. It's got to be fun. It's got to be encouraged to scan a code, because you know what? We've got some cinema tickets to give away with a brand. We've got a discount voucher that you just download. You show it at point of sale. They scan your code that you've received on your phone because you've scanned the product and you've bought numerous products. You're a loyal customer. There's a loyalty platform. There's customer engagement. It gives a customer peace of mind, and it makes it a little bit easier for them to come back. So there's a number of points that companies like us are trying to get across with brands so they can encourage more and more scanning. And what actually happens, and sorry, when you get your consumers to scan your product, they are authenticating your product for you. It's not down to customs and border control. Your own consumers are scanning and doing your authentication for you. So the brands need to step up as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and to your point, you're quite right. Counterfeiters are just as creative, and they get better with time. They're exposed to the same technology that all of us are exposed to, and therefore they always find a way to make it happen.
That's right.
Amanda, I want to talk to you about, you mentioned a possible scanning situation just now, which I would imagine that would need a lot of funding, but I'll come back to you. I just want to bring Jaco and Felix in. And Felix, in your view, what must be done? Just picking up from what Paul said.
Yeah. Like Paul focused a lot on the consumer, and where as well the mentality change needs to happen is in the business community, where the approach is no longer like, hey, I don't care about intellectual property because I want to save costs. I mean, that's many times the motivation to say, like, why should I pay a license or something like this? And the problem behind this is if you always go into the only sales argument that you deliver, like, hey, we can make it cheaper for you. Like that's in the end the goal, why you violate intellectual property rights, because you say, like, I can offer my goods, my services cheaper than if I would buy a license or if I would like completely develop something by myself. The problem with that is then you're never going to be able, A, to get a sustainable margin for yourself so that you can build up a sustainable business field, and B, you are more and more excluded from international markets. That's something that I observe. So what's going to happen, for example, in Germany and in the EU is there is a new supply chain act that says like, hey, big companies have to monitor their supply chains for rights violations, for intellectual property rights violations, but as well for human rights violations. So what the big companies do is they say like, okay, fair enough. So if I have a vendor sitting in South Africa, for example, I expect from these companies that they're going to be licensed. If you're not licensed, you're out of my vendor list. So companies that don't invest into, like, I would say, like honorable business practice, that don't invest in showing the advantage of their goods, not only by the prices, gonna be excluded from international markets. And in the medium term, this can lead to the fact that these companies don't have a future because they are limited to their local markets, and then they cannot compete as soon as border opens. That's a little bit what I would say, like educate the business community as well, that this is not something where you can make shortly money. It's like the question, can your family live from it in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years?
And point taken, you're focusing more on the private sector. They also need to be educated as well. And Paul, you were focusing more on consumer, to get the necessary education that they need. And Jaco, based on both Paul and Felix's comments, looking at both consumers and the public sector, what is your view? I think you're muted.
Okay.
There we go.
I'm there. Okay.
Fantastic.
So, looking at it from a consumer's perspective, counterfeiting is socially tolerated. We see consumers flocking to open markets in popular holiday destinations to buy counterfeit branded clothing, handbags, shoes, watches, whatever, and that obviously create a market. But what the consumer don't what they don't realize is that criminal organizations not only use that smuggling network for clothing, shoes, they do it for pharmaceuticals as well. Now, if you look at pharmaceuticals, I mean, it has life-threatening dangers if substandard or counterfeit medicines end up in the wrong hands. In the past, if you look at the pharmaceutical industry, counterfeiting was focused on the so-called lifestyle drugs like your Viagra's and steroids. But today they focused on other medicines like insulin, cancer medication, cardiovascular drugs, antibiotics, anti-malarials. Some researchers have suggested that as much as 42% of medicine distributed in Africa is counterfeit. The World Health Organization estimates that there's over 1 million deaths annually due to substandard and counterfeit medicines. That's mass murder. I mean, that's not counterfeiting, that's mass murder. And I think, a lot of education, a lot of awareness, should be created around pharmaceuticals and other substances, because the same networks, the same criminals use that supply chain networks to distribute these substances.
I feel like we need a global movement.
I agree.
Do you agree? I feel
agree.
like we need a global movement that is intended to, to share as much information as it can possibly do.
Actually, happy to change behavior.
To change behavior,
Yeah,
rather. Yeah.
I think we need to change behavior. And the only way in which we do that is to reward good behavior. And that actually comes from the philosopher Skinner. He said, if you reward good behavior, you change behavior. So the app that you were referring to just now, the initiative.
Yes.
So it is still ongoing, Paul.
Is it a
We
secret?
started
Yes.
talking.
Is it still a secret, or
No,
was I naughty because I just, okay. all
No,
right,
it's
yeah.
not a secret. And
Okay.
we're very happy for this platform because at least we can create a little bit more awareness. So we saw that the only way in which we can get consumers to scan, because yes, it's a task. But if we target the youth, the young people, and those are the ones that usually change behavior. If you want to change behavior, start young.
Yeah.
Me and you, we set in our ways. We don't change very easily. But the young ones, we have a chance on them still. So for us, we target the young people and we want to make them aware of the value of intellectual property rights. So the idea behind the app is when you go to the shops and you buy a number of goods and you get home, the children must actually fight to get to the packages and start scanning, because if you scan, you get a little bit of information about, wow, you did the rights thing, and rights referring to intellectual property rights, and then we teach them a little bit about trademarks and about the value of IP, and also about buying legitimate goods from legitimate trusted sources.
Yes.
Because in the olden days, when you went down the road to your spaza shop, you know the owner, you trust what he sells you.
There's a sense of trust.
True. But online, that sentiment and trust disappears, because what you see is hardly ever, if you don't buy from legitimate sites, what's delivered to your house. So for us, that trust relationship needs to be recreated. And if you can do that by scanning the barcodes and getting specific information, and then also getting taught when you open for that information. So to advertise on radio or on television is, oh, you maybe hear something, but now you've bought a product and you get information about the product there and then. So that's when you're most receptive or accepting of the information that you taught, and it's small pieces of information that you tend to remember better. And once you've now scanned the product as a young child, you get a bit of cell phone airtime, or you get a movie ticket, or you get a discount on your second bought. And that's the idea behind the application. It's not been launched like our statistical application has just been launched, but that's some of the initiatives that government is taking to make sure that we raise the level of awareness for consumers.
All right, and who rewards this scanner?
Who rewards them? Our IP rights, our owners of intellectual property rights.
Okay.
Because they form partnerships in this fight against fakes.
Yeah.
And they are on board, and they then reward good and best behavior.
Fantastic. And you're quite right. I mean, we all know, many of us are parents, those little people in our homes, if we try and change their behavior at that stage, by the time they're sitting here, half the job is done. Can you imagine if the local narrative was incorporated into the curriculum? Can you imagine the difference that it would make? Yako, you're nodding. You don't necessarily have to talk about that, but is there something else you want to bring up?
No, but I think the kids, are our future, so we need to educate them. I think that will be a good thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy. I was just going to say, I was saying before that I'm in Dubai at the moment, and I was here just before Christmas on a anti-counterfeit expo. We were invited over, and we got chatting to. I was on a panel, and I was asked if you had an open checkbook, Paul, with your technology and everything available to you, what would you suggest for the UAE as a whole? It turns out they've got 1,000 customs inspectors here in the UAE, 1,000, okay? And they're checking products. Their job, they check products. They're educated as to how to spot a fake pair of Nike trainers or a fake box of Apple products. And this is ongoing. I work very closely with the ACG in the UK, and they hold regular training events for customs and excise inspectors and controllers to understand how to recognize fake products. And the brands do this training as well. They say, look, on our products, you need to look out for this. And on our products, we do it differently like this. Usually the strap is a little bit different, and they're trying to educate all the time. And I was asked this question: you had an open checkbook, what would you need? What would you do? And I'd say, well, those we would put our highest tech, invisible, covert markings and codes, variable codes, onto products, I said, and we would furnish every customs inspector with our equipment, which looks just a little bit like, it's like a scanning, you can't really see it because of my background. You've got this scanning camera thing here, and this reads infrared variable codes. So you put an invisible serial code onto a product, and it's infrared, it's on a very high on the infrared spectrum, so it's very difficult to detect. So you need a specialist machine. But if we gave every single inspector one of these machines, it's probably an investment of $2 or $3 million US. That's all for the UAE. And then you leverage from the brands to say, look, if you want your products cleared through customs and inspected properly, and an ability to understand the fake from the genuine, you need to apply that code to every single one of your products. And the brands are doing this in different ways already. It would be a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a cent to get those codes and invisible marks on products coming into the UAE, every one of which would be able to be scanned. And maybe it's a double-pronged attack. You educate the youth and the consumer, but at the customs end as well, we do something there to give them the equipment and an ability and the training to be able to detect fake from genuine. And I've actually got a meeting first thing in the morning with head of customs here in Dubai. So we're really trying to make inroads. And I think maybe we could even look at doing something like that for South Africa as well, working very closely with Amanda. So I think we could, almost a two-pronged approach. You're getting it from the customs and inspection level, and you're also getting it from brand and consumers as well.
Oh, happy if I may add there. I want to
please go for it. Go for it.
Well, I think the idea is amazing. The problem that I see is if you transform or if you want to copy this idea from the UAE to almost any African nation, it doesn't work because the motivation for the Gulf countries is another one. They don't create these jobs because they are actually afraid of faked products and so on. They create these jobs because they want to provide jobs to their population, and they can do this because they make a lot of revenue with oil and gas. And unfortunately, that's not the case for most African countries. So I simply wanted to highlight, I think the idea, make it easy to detect. That's amazing. Thinking about hey, why don't we simply hire more people? It's going to be a challenge for most nations in Africa. What I wanted to agree with Jacob before, what he said when he said that's not a small violation, or that's not infringement of intellectual property laws, that's mass murderer. I think there's an important point that you are, when you talk to most consumers, they have this impression I don't know. I know maybe it's not an original product, but it's cheaper. I'm fine with it, because they are not aware what can be the consequences of it. What can be the personal consequences if maybe quality standards are not met, but as well, what are the consequences for the community? Because in the end, you sabotage a working economical ecosystem where fair business manners are met. So, employing enough jobs in almost all countries with fastly growing populations, and then we talk about sub-Saharan region, in total, is one of the biggest challenges that all communities have. And you cannot create a lot of jobs if you don't establish a minimum amount of trust, and as well return of investment in the products. So if you only are looking for the quick and dirty way, in the end, what we need to do is need to educate the population that to say guys, this is not a small thing. This is what causes you that your family members have a lesser chance to get a job. That's, I think, it would be a very strong message to reach this out. And I'm pretty sure almost every family has experience with that. So That's a little bit my impression.
Thank you so much, Felix. Is that, and I'm sure we agree that with any innovation or any, suggestion rather, that is put forward, one would have to look at the pros and cons, and you've just highlighted some of the challenges, which are, well taken. But also want to say that, Paul, I think that what you also shared with us as a probability, I mean, that could be a game changer, a massive game changer in many ways than one. That'll come with these pros and cons and all of that. But I would imagine that in an effort to try and find a workable way, one would need to start somewhere. And it is at this point where I don't want to leave this to questions and answers later. I wanted us to have a discussion, a kind of vibe. And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask any member of the audience to, throw one or two questions at any of the panelists and let's have a discussion. I'm of the view that this is not intended for us to just have a chat amongst ourselves. As panelists, it's also to benefit everybody who's sitting in the room. Yeah? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Have I just thrown you under the bus, all the panelists?
There may even be an online question.
There might also be an online question. Yeah. You see, with a name like mine, Happy, you can't afford to be unhappy at me. So I'll take a chance every now and then and hope for the best.
I'm monitoring the
Hi, Linda.
online. I'm monitoring the online, and there aren't any questions, just comments. What an interesting chat and what an interesting conversation. Lots of good ideas coming through, etc. So no questions for online.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for keeping an eye on that, Linda. Fantastic.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
While the audience decide on a question, let me just expand a little bit on the other part or the other leg of the education and awareness. And for us at CIPC, it is training and capacity building of law enforcement partners.
Right.
And for us, that is crucial to making sure that we have a secure supply chain. And we have worked very closely with customs, and they've got a couple of technology tools that they utilize to analyze risks and specific supply chains. If goods are always coming from one shipping route and suddenly it's now coming from a different shipping route, then it should raise a red flag. So making sure that we have that training and capacity in place to protect our consumers is as crucial as to make our consumers aware that they buy from legitimate sources. So I fully agree with both of you, Paul and Felix, that training law enforcement, and if you had a ton of money, what would you do? Make sure that they've got that knowledge and expertise to protect consumers, the end users of all the products.
Sure. And for those who don't comply, we will send Jaco to come find them. He's the police, remember? There's a hand at the back. Hi.
Just in terms of, you're talking about the solutions and again on the training, Paul, it's quite interesting when I think about, all the training we are getting, and again, so I'm in the tobacco industry, so again, you've got so many industries that need, these law enforcement agencies need to know about their products. How do we ensure that these law enforcement agents are not overwhelmed with all the amount of information and I kind of just thought of it now. I mean, there's alcohol, there's pharmaceuticals, there's tobacco, there's a whole array of industries. Like, how do we ensure that that these agents actually are able to, I know we're building capacity, but is it fair for them to know everything about everything? And is that possible? And maybe that's a question to the CIPC perhaps, or what you've seen from a global perspective as well.
Yeah, and you're questioning capacity, right? Oh,
correct, yeah.
No problem. Please go ahead. Who was that? Was it Paul?
I was just with tongue in cheek, I was just going to say, well, you need to use Verify Me on everything, you see, and then you set the standard. We use one set of equipment for all your inspectors, and one set of codes that is very secret, and covert markings with your tax stamps, generating far more revenue for your government as well, an ability to for the counterfeiters, should I say, to really make sure the counterfeiters can't copy that label, those codes, those hidden marks, and help generate more revenue for the government as well through the tax and the duties. But it is about standardizing. There's 20 companies like us trying to do the same thing, all offering slightly different. We're trying to train customs and excise inspectors differently for different products. It is a minefield, and how do we standardize it? Yeah, and we're a well-funded company, so we would joint invest in providing this kind of equipment for inspectors on a grand scale, because you can really leverage you can leverage a lot of the costs from these big brands. I'm working with just an average size apparel producer. They have a $300 billion turnover on one SKU. So it's to do with men's underwear. That's all. $300 million. They've got a 3% counterfeit issue. It's a $9 million a year counterfeit issue. And they will pay between 150 and 300,000, about the same again, about 3 to 5% to counteract that issue. So these brands have got lots of money to spend on counterfeit. It doesn't have to come out of the consumer's pocket in South Africa. It doesn't necessarily all have to be government spend. You can leverage this from the brands that are making a lot of money from consumers. So, and we help do that as well. So I think there's money out there that we can leverage.
I just, sorry, Happy, as a follow-up, then how do you kind of, curtail, and again, we had this discussion around corruption early on today. So when you have that official at the border post, or officials, or whoever is, corruption is an issue. So how do you ensure that even if you have this device, that it is used properly and correctly to be able to record what it needs to record and identify what it needs to identify? Sure. There's still that element of corruption that's still a very relevant thing on our continent.
In a similar way, maybe you reward that individual as well, because every scan that they do, it records it, geolocates it, timestamps it. You know who the inspector is, you know the product they're inspecting, and you know that inspector number 4 is doing a lot of inspections, and he's finding counterfeit, he's stopping the fake goods, he's letting the proper goods through. And when you scan a genuine product, it flags as a genuine product. You can easily run a report as to how many, which inspectors are inspecting how many goods, where they're doing that, which borders are getting more traffic, where are more inspections coming in, and any. I'm sorry, I'm just going to decline a call from my mother. She keeps ringing me. I have no idea why. I apologize. So you reward good work from the inspectors as well, and you'll soon see any patterns on a countrywide scale as to what products are being stopped more in which locations, which ports, So it's everything is recorded, and it creates really useful data and data analytics. Yeah.
There's the reward reality that's coming in again. We seem to be. Where's the mic? Does the lady still have the mic? Okay. I was about to say, in typical South African lingo, honorable member, you are out of order. Bring the mic.
So on that note, let me respond to Leandra's question on how do you make sure that you don't overload your law enforcement with knowledge about specific products. So you take them out of their normal day jobs, bring them to a training course like we've been having over the next 3 days, and teach them generic information on intellectual property rights. so that they can apply the knowledge to each and every consignment that they stop or shop that they go into. And then you bring along your expert, your IP rights owner, because the partnership is crucial in the fight against IP rights. It is not a government-only responsibility. It's a joint responsibility with industry and government working together to protect consumers.
Is it attainable and sustainable though, Amanda? How many, foot soldiers are you going to bring to this kind of environment and discussion?
Well, luckily, we have only a couple of ports of entry into South Africa, and we've got excellent customs officials that prevent the goods coming into home consumption. So those stops is very valuable. And then once it's in home consumption, we have a number of police that can deal with the issues. Not enough. Surely we can increase capacity, and hopefully our Minister of Finance is allocating some more budget
as we speak
to law enforcement. Hopefully we will see that happening. But there's a lot we can still do. And that's why I want to stress the point is get more eyes and ears on the ground. Get our consumers on board. Let them take responsibility. Advise them about the risk of purchasing online goods if you don't trust the source of the goods. If you go to big websites like Alibaba, Amazon, Takealot in South Africa, they are supposed to protect our consumers. They must make sure that they don't allow counterfeiters to sell on their platforms, and there must be consequences for them. And that's also an area where we specifically get involved to make sure that they do sign undertakings and agreements, and that they do come to the party to protect consumers in the end. It ultimately stays government's responsibility to protect its consumers. But the partnership in which we do it is crucial for that to be effective.
Sure. Mindset.
True.
Mindset takes us back to that.
Happy, I think I can reply something to the question that we had before, and as well we have a comment in the comment section where it was asked like, hey, if you can highlight the importance of law enforcement and deep intelligence, and as well know your subject in regarding to the public authorities. If you have the time, I would connect 2 points.
Would you like to take that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So
go for it.
I'm like I mentioned, my specialty is, or Arian's specialty is software and machine learning. And you can go into deep intelligence. There are a million names for it. In the end, these are statistical approaches. And they can be extremely powerful tools to narrow down the problem that you are facing to a handleable scale. So the question, for example, if there's an officer in customs control and they have like a million deliveries to check, what are the 10%, the 1% that they should actually look at, and what are the 90% that are irrelevant? So, and a lot of hope is out there that you do some magical tricks, you use deep learning, and suddenly the task is done by itself. But that's not how it works. And I want to demystify a little bit machine learning in this part. So machine learning is a statistical approach. And the first important limitation of this is statistical approaches can show you correlations, but not causations. This is a fundamentally different understanding than a human inspector would have of a case, where they would literally look at a case and where they would do an investigation. So a machine can only do correlations and can point to things, but it doesn't understand in the same way like a human being does it. And the second point is these machines, these algorithms need to be trained. And there we come into data quality. This is a key feature that I'm facing every day. Garbage in, garbage out. If you train machine learning algorithms to narrow down the workload and the focus of an inspector, for example, to relevant parts, the question is, like, how do you train the algorithms? And therefore you need proper data samples that are from high quality. And there are 2 limitations to this. The first thing is the machine learning code will not become better than the provided learning samples. And the provided learning samples usually come from subject matter experts. They come, for example, from officers in customs control that do this every day, and you build up a statistical sample over time with 10,000 examples, but you don't need to have the expectation that suddenly the machine does it better than the humans that are doing this every day. And the second point is it's absolutely crucial if you want to build something up like this, get your best officers to train the machines on it, because then you can increase the average result on it. And that's a little bit the thing. So it's not like a lot of people ask me like, oh, machine learning, it's very simple. You program something and then magically suddenly there's a result that pops out, but that's not how it works. That's an unrealistic expectation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Felix. And before we take our parting shots, you know, because we're nearing the end of the discussion, I think there was one question on the floor. Oh, there's two. All right. Ah, I recognize you, ma'am. Please go ahead. Oh, the gentleman here, towards the front. Come towards. There we go. Great.
Thank you very much, Happy, and the rest of the panelists for the very informative session that we're having today. Mine is not really a question, it's more a comment, and it's a comment that relates to a statement that Jaco made regarding the stats for the 40% of pharmaceuticals in Africa that's actually counterfeit, and the fact that we have 1 million deaths per annum, which is obviously very concerning. And I think he went further to describe it as a mass murder. And I think a lot of us here would agree with that statement. And for me, what bothers me about that is that nothing much is being done in terms of counterfeit medication, you know, in terms of really stemming the tide of it and to prevent these deaths, because these deaths are obviously mostly with the most vulnerable of our society. And I'd like to share an example of an investigation that I dealt with a few years ago, where there were illegally imported medication that came into South Africa, and it came in plastic drums. They were all different colored tablets, wow. And they were destined for the rural areas of a province. And this was selective, obviously, because police presence is not that rife in those areas. And also the investigation of this sort of crime is not rife as well, or heavy in those areas. These counterfeit tablets were then sold to general dealers. General dealers would then sell these tablets, different colored tablets, no markings on them, nothing whatsoever, to individuals within the community who would then repackage them into little packets, 10 in a packet, and sell them at 5 Rand a packet. And their target of sale was actually the pensioners.
Wow.
So at the end of the month, when Cash Paymaster Services were paying out pensions to pensioners, these vendors would go out there, and as the pensioners collect their pension, they would then sell them these tablets. Now, we have to be realistic about this, because a pensioner in a rural area, you offer them some tablet for any sort of pain, you know, any ailment, whether it's a stomach pain or a pain in your leg or hand, etc., are more prone to just buy that tablet from you, even though they know that you're not really a doctor. Because the thought of traveling an entire day, the cost of it, etc., sitting the entire day in a hospital, in a public hospital, waiting for treatment, is daunting. So they buy it. And we had a special raid that was planned with the police crime intelligence, you know, multidisciplinary approach with the Medicine Control Council as well, and seized these items and arrested a few individuals. So the compound revealed that, you know, some of the ingredients in these tablets were actually lethal, and they were being sold to pensioners. So it's unknown how many probably died of you know, taking or consuming these illegal medication. But it's as good as murder, as Jaco pointed out. And I think as a society, you know, in our country especially, and a stance by our president in terms of his recent amendment of legislation regarding GBV, you know, gender-based violence, we take it seriously. There's many campaigns on the ground at the moment, regarding that. And for me, I'm trying to draw a comparison between what's different between these two issues. And the commonality there for me is vulnerability. In your gender-based violence, you have vulnerable individuals, you know, women and children mostly that are being abused. With pharmaceutical issues, you have the most vulnerable that are being targeted. And they're suffering the consequences, fatally sometimes. So I think as a society, we need to relook at that. The gentleman sitting in the front, I think he's a policeman, brought up an example earlier on regarding the rhino poaching. And that took our government a long time to acknowledge the seriousness of it. And eventually they did. So I think the question now is, how long is it going to take for our government and maybe governments of other countries as well to acknowledge the serious impact of counterfeit medication in particular, not to mention the other counterfeit articles which cause a strain and retards our economy. I mean, as we speak now, our finance minister has probably mentioned the word economy more than 100 times in his budget speech. So I think we need to get real about it, and I think, Happy, you suggested a global stance regarding these issues, and I support that. And I think maybe that's the way to go. And sometimes leaders tend to gravitate towards a global instruction more than a local instruction from the people.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I'm going to take a parting shots from the panelists, and I feel like kicking off with whoever smiles the most. Yako. Your parting shot, Yako.
Yako, you're still muted.
Yako, you have no sound.
Yako.
She must have repeated that last 2 minutes. I'm going to leave the floor some food for thought. I mean, the gentleman that spoke prior to me, you know, made a valid statement, and I'm, you know, fully in support of that. And I think, you know, most of the time, pharmaceutical crime and counterfeiting is, you know, being seen as intellectual property issue. And there's a lot of, you know, as you know, I previously mentioned, loss of life if substandard and, you know, counterfeit medicine are being used. So my food for thought is, if you look at 2 acts, the Medicine Related Substances Act, 101, and if you look at the Counterfeit Goods Act, 37 of 97, it you know, outline, you know, punishment for counterfeiting being either 5,000 Rand fine or 3 years in imprisonment, and another act, a 10,000 Rand fine or 10 years imprisonment. And if you look at that kind of sanctions, and you know, I've, you know, previously, you know, mentioned the word mass murder, and if you look at, you know, the devastating effect counterfeit pharmaceuticals can have on its consumer, I don't think that those sanctions is sufficient enough to act as a deterrent for those sort of crimes. And that's the point I want to make.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Thank you so much, Yako. And by the way, the story you shared with us, I have no words. I feel like Yako is saying that someone must go to jail for that, honestly. Felix, your parting shots, please.
I would say I would raise the point of realistic expectations. I agree with Jacko, there needs to be punishment for wrong behavior, but let's face it, as long as the economic incentives are that strong, we're not going to be able to substantially fight our intellectual property rights violations and the consequences of it. So what I would highlight, if government authorities take this subject seriously, that they find incentives ways where good behavior is rewarded. And we had this already before. And that's something I absolutely would like to highlight, to show that investment in the own intellectual property, good business practice, doesn't mean that you have a disadvantage in business, it actually means you can have the access to other markets. It means you can create a substantial revenue in your own business because you convince clients and customers not with a cheap product, simply with a good quality, with an origin that is like verified, and that means something to clients. And that's something I strongly believe in, conditions by rewards than by punishments.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Felix. Paul, your closing remarks?
Yes, thank you very much. And again, thank you, Amanda, for inviting me to the panel today. It's always a pleasure. I enjoyed getting to know you over the last few years. And I hope that we could, soon perhaps do something together. As I say, this is not being esoteric or anything, but, we are a well-funded company. We are willing to make investments as well to help train, to help work with people like the CIPC. And maybe if you're saying, there's 2 or 3 ports of entry where goods are coming into SA, I think we've got an opportunity to do something about that. I think we could help with the training. I think we can help with the tech. And I think we could then together leverage revenues from the big brands that want access to your market, and they've got to toe the line, and there will be a way then of generating revenue for government as well from the what you're asking from the brands. And I think there's a way of working together, and I just wanted to make sure that you understood that we would be there to help in any way we could. So we look forward to hopefully doing something with you, and knowing we've got a local SA partner as well now that is contracted with Verify Me, based down in based in Joburg. So we'd like to make that introduction as well.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much for your insights. Thank you. Amanda, last but not least.
Thank you very much, Happy. I want to conclude by saying only 2 things. Most importantly is also the efforts that's made through Yaku's pharma IP crime task team, and that speaks to partnerships between government and industry, especially in the supply chain area, and to lobby political will. If we have the politicians on our side to fight IP crime, who can be against us? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for your indulgence. Linda, it's back to you.
Thank you so much. What a great panel. Let's thank our panel and Happy as well, our moderator. Fantastic job, all of you. Very interesting. People really enjoyed this panel. It was practical, with practical solutions and interpretation of the issues. That's the most dynamic result. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to all this afternoon. Thank you for your training this morning, Amanda, and to your audience. Thank you for actively participating. Thank you for the Commission to partner with us. And I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, because tomorrow we have really, really nifty topics to talk about. We're going to go into digital IP and social media. These are things that need a lot of discussion. So please join us, everyone, tomorrow for another great session. And I wish the training in the morning, great training, great lunch, and see you tomorrow afternoon.
Fantastic. Thank you. We need a picture, please.
Okay, guys, you can just put me back on. Are we offline? Online, offline.